Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving right into the huge forces that are reshaping the entire global economy as we head into 2026. You see, a year of tariffs has completely rewired supply chains, it's redrawn alliances, and yeah, it's created a whole new set of winners and losers. So, let's get into it.
To really get a handle on these huge global shifts, it helps to start with someone on the ground. Listen to this.
I run a business in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and everything comes in from Europe, so I'm paying 25% tariffs on everything. It catches up to you.
That right there, that's the real-world impact of these big policy decisions. It's about actual businesses, actual families feeling the squeeze. And today, we're going to unpack exactly why that's happening.
All right, so here's our game plan. First step, we'll tackle the 2025 tariff shockwave. Then we'll dig into China's pretty surprising pivot. After that, we'll look at the new winners and losers around the globe, see what the experts are saying about a potential slowdown, and wrap it all up by figuring out what this actually means for you.
Okay, let's kick things off with the big one, the event that really set all this in motion, the 2025 tariff shockwave. So what happened? Well, back in April 2025, the U.S. slapped new duties on goods from, well, pretty much everywhere. It was, and I'm quoting here, a shock to global trade. The whole idea was to completely redraw the map of how the world does business. So what was the thinking behind this? The goal, really, was twofold. Cut down on trade deficits, that's just when you're buying more than you're selling, and of course, bring those manufacturing jobs back home. But the reality? Well, it turned out to be something else entirely. We saw what economists call trade diversion, not trade destruction. So, what on earth is trade diversion?
And this is where things get really interesting because it shows just how resilient the global economy can be. Trade diversion basically means that instead of trade just stopping dead in its tracks, the tariffs just rerouted it. It's like a river hitting a dam and finding new paths. So yeah, China's exports to the US took a nosedive, but guess who stepped in? Countries like Mexico, India, and a whole bunch of nations in Southeast Asia. They filled the gap. The system bent, for sure, but it absolutely did not break.
Which, of course, brings us to the country right at the epicenter of this whole storm, China. Because what they did next was kind of incredible. Let's talk about their trillion-dollar pivot and how they went from being the main target of these massive tariffs to somehow achieving a record-breaking surplus.
Okay, get a load of this number. $1 trillion. That's the trade surplus China managed to post in 2025 despite all that pressure. To put that in perspective, no other country in history has ever hit that milestone. It is an absolutely staggering figure, and it just goes to show how effectively they managed to sidestep the full force of those U.S. tariffs.
So the big question is, how on earth did they pull that off? Well, it wasn't luck. It was a really smart three-part strategy. First, they basically reshuffled their supply chains, pouring tons of capital into Southeast Asia to get around the tariffs. Second, they doubled down on what they do best, channeling all this extra cash into high-tech manufacturing at home. We're talking EVs, batteries, solar panels, the whole shebang. And third, they just started buying less from the rest of the world. Put it all together, you get a massive trade surplus. And this right here, this really gets to the core of the challenge for the U.S. A huge factor in all of this is the wage gap. Just look at the numbers. The average manufacturing wage in the U.S. is about $60,000 a year. In China, it's closer to $15,000. That's a 4-to-1 difference. It means trying to compete purely on labor costs is, well, pretty much impossible, unless you automate everything, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of bringing jobs back, right?
Now, a clash between the world's two biggest economies doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It creates all these ripple effects all around the world. And that means new winners, but also new pressures. Let's explore who they are.
So in the middle of this global scramble for critical minerals, the stuff that powers all our tech, African nations have played their cards brilliantly. They've very cleverly managed to avoid getting backed into a corner, forced to pick a side between the US, Europe, or China. Instead of getting locked into one deal, they've basically said, no thanks, we're not playing that game. And they're engaging with everyone. And what's the result of that strategy? A huge diversification of their economic partnerships. We're talking new key players stepping in, like the United Arab Emirates, Japan, Brazil, India, the list goes on. It's a really smart move that gives them a ton more leverage and, frankly, opens up all these new doors for trade, investment, and financing.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, they found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one side, you've got the US saying, hey, you need to pay more for your own defense, be more self-reliant. But on the other side, you've got some really intense pressure at home. We're talking high national debt and welfare budgets that are already stretched to the limit. It's that classic, tough debate. Weapons or welfare?
And you can really see that tension right here. Defense spending is climbing, no doubt, to meet these new security realities. But every dollar or euro that goes there puts more and more pressure on welfare budgets that are already struggling with things like aging populations and higher healthcare costs. This isn't just numbers on a page. It forces governments to make incredibly tough choices that have a direct impact on their own citizens.
Okay, so we've got all these massive shifts, all these moving parts. The big question is, where is this all headed? What are the experts predicting for the year ahead? Let's take a look at the forecast and see if a slowdown is really on the horizon for 2026.
This really gives us a clear snapshot of the situation. You see, 2025 was a year of surprises. The global economy actually did a lot better than people feared. The US was surprisingly resilient, and as we saw, China hit that mind-boggling surplus. But when we look ahead to 2026, the story changes. The forecast is for a moderate slowdown in both of the world's biggest economic engines. In the US, the labor market is starting to soften, and in China, there's a huge red flag. Retail sales have totally collapsed.
Which brings us, really, to the bottom line. The most important question of all. What does any of this mean for you, for me? How do all these high-level global shifts actually connect back to our own wallets?
The reality is, all around the world, regular households are feeling it. The pressure is mounting. You've got rising costs for just about everything. You've got labor shortages making things tricky, a serious housing crunch, more and more debt, and this feeling of job uncertainty. The squeeze is coming from pretty much every direction.
And so, that leaves us with one big hanging question. The global economy, against all odds, held up surprisingly well in 2025. But now, with its two main engines, the US and China, both starting to sputter, is 2026 going to be the year that households, that real people, truly start to feel the squeeze? That right there is the critical question as we head into this next chapter.